Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the shadowy world of the Middle Ages. When the roads were long, the nights were cold, and the smell of damp hay seemed to follow you everywhere. You're going to walk these worn paths in your own shoes, although in truth they'll be rough leather cracked from rain and dust. You probably won't survive this, not because of the danger from robbers or wolves, although yes, that too, but because of the sheer discomfort. Your body isn't ready for the damp straw bedding, the drafty walls, and the kind of food that makes you rethink eating at all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's dusk in the year 1327, and you've been walking for most of the day. The road behind you is nothing more than a pair of muddy tracks pressed into the earth by countless cartwheels. Your feet are sore. Your pack is heavier than you remember. Somewhere ahead is a town, though town in these times is a generous word. You're not expecting street lamps or bakeries with glass windows. Just a cluster of timber-framed houses leaning together like tired old men, a church spire reaching skyward, and perhaps, if you're lucky, a place to stay that doesn't smell entirely of livestock. Travelers in medieval Europe have no neat row of budget hotels to choose from. Where you sleep depends entirely on who you are, what you can afford, and how much risk you're willing to take. If you were a noble or a wealthy merchant, you might already have sent word ahead to a contact in town, arranging for a bed in the upper room of a respectable house. But you are neither. You are one of the countless souls on the road, with little more than a few coins, a bundle of clothing, and the faint hope that someone will open their door to you. The first option, though, not the most glamorous, is the inn. Inns in the 14th century are scattered along main trade routes and near town gates. Some are run by families who've been serving travelers for generations. Others are little more than taverns with an upstairs loft. When you arrive, you might see a simple sign, perhaps a painted shield, or a carved wooden boot dangling over the door. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke ale and damp wool. The innkeeper, often a stout, practical person, with a wary eye, will size you up the moment you step in. Beds here are shared. Not just the room, the bed. If you've paid for a spot, you might find yourself wedged between two strangers, one snoring like a sawmill, the other with a tendency to roll over and claim the blanket. If you're unlucky, you'll share your space with a family of fleas, which in medieval Europe is practically guaranteed. Privacy is not part of the bargain. Still, there's warmth from the fire downstairs, and maybe a bowl of pottage, thick vegetable stew to fill your stomach. In a cold and unpredictable world, that's more than most travelers can hope for. If the inn is full, or if your purse is too light, you might try the church. Many churches and monasteries maintain a tradition of hospitality, especially for pilgrims. You could present yourself at the door, hat in hand, explaining your journey and your need for a place to rest. The monks might offer you a pallet in a corner of the guest hall, bread and cheese for supper, and the blessing of a roof over your head. But this hospitality isn't endless. They'll expect you to move on in the morning, and if you're visibly healthy and able-bodied, they might subtly or not so subtly encourage you to continue without lingering. There's also the possibility of staying in a private home. In some regions, hospitality is an unspoken duty, particularly in smaller villages where travelers are few. A knock on the right door might bring you a spot by the hearth or a space in the hayloft. Payment might not be demanded, though your host may expect help with chores, chopping wood, tending animals, or fetching water from the well. Still, you can never quite be sure how welcome you are, and overstaying your welcome can turn smiles to cold stares very quickly. Then there are the far less pleasant options, sleeping outdoors, in barns, or under bridges. If you're truly desperate, you might find a dry patch of ground under the shelter of an old tree, wrapping your cloak tightly against the night air. There's danger in the darkness. Wolves prowl the forests in some regions, and human predators are far more common. The smart traveler stays close to the road near other people, even if those other people are strangers. Tonight, though, you decide to try the inn. The wooden sign swings in the breeze, the faint sound of laughter spilling from within. You push open the heavy door, greeted by the sudden warmth of a smoky fire and the smell of ale. Conversations pause just long enough for curious eyes to flick toward you, measuring your worth or your weakness. The innkeeper approaches, wiping their hands on a rag, and asks what you want. You slide your coins across the counter. It's enough for a bed, perhaps even a bowl of stew. The upstairs room is dimly lit by a single candle. Your bed is a wide wooden frame with a thin mattress stuffed with straw. A rough wool blanket lies crumpled at the foot. Two figures already occupy the far side, curled under their cloaks. You take the remaining space, laying down your pack as a pillow. The mattress creaks beneath you, and a faint rustle tells you the straw is alive with tiny, unwelcome tenants. You pull your cloak tighter, turn toward the wall, and close your eyes. Through the thin walls, you can still hear the noise from below, boots thudding against the floor, mugs clinking, bursts of laughter. Somewhere in the room, a man coughs, a deep rattling sound that makes you instinctively hold your breath. The smell of damp wool and unwashed bodies thickens the air. You remind yourself that this is better than the open road. Sleep comes slowly. Your mind drifts, and you wonder what tomorrow's road will bring: another inn, perhaps kinder company, maybe even a dry, flea-free bed. But in this century, travel is never comfortable. It is a test of endurance, of trust in strangers, of adapting to whatever shelter you can find before the sun slips below the horizon. And tonight, your shelter is a creaking bed in a smoky inn, shared with strangers you'll never know by name. You wake in the dim half-light before dawn, not because you want to, but because the room has come alive. One of your bedfellows stirs, muttering something in a language you don't understand, and then swings his legs down onto the floor with a thump. The boards groan under his weight. Someone else somewhere in the building is already clattering about with buckets fetching water from the well outside. The faint smell of smoke drifts up from the hearth below, last night's embers stirred back to life. You sit up slowly, feeling the stiff protest of your muscles. The straw mattress has done you no favors. As you gather your things, the other travelers in the room go about their own quiet departures, none of you speaking much. Words are a luxury in these moments. Everyone is focused on getting back to the road. You sling your pack over your shoulder and make your way downstairs, the wooden steps creaking in complaint. The inn's common room is a different place at this hour. Gone is the lively chatter of the evening. Instead, there's a subdued shuffling of feet, the clink of a mug here and there. The innkeeper's wife sets out bowls of thin porridge, and you eat without ceremony. There is no sugar, no honey, just oats boiled in water, filling the belly more than pleasing the tongue. But warm food is warm food, and you're grateful for it. Outside, the air is sharp and cool. The sky is streaked with pale pink and orange as the sun edges up from the horizon. The village is still half asleep. Shutters remain closed, dogs curl in doorways, and the only other figures moving are those with reasons as urgent as your own. You follow the road east, leaving the inn behind. Your path takes you past hedgerows and open fields, the occasional patch of woodland. Travel in the Middle Ages is not the steady, smooth rhythm of modern roads. It is a constant negotiation between mud and stone rut and puddle. The road can disappear entirely in bad weather, forcing you to guess where the track might have been before the rain washed away its edges. For this reason, travelers often aim to reach their next shelter before nightfall, not just for safety, but because finding your way in the dark is an invitation to disaster. By midday, your feet ache again, and your stomach reminds you that the porridge was hours ago. You stop at a small roadside tavern, a rough timber-framed building with a thatched roof that sags in the middle. Inside, the atmosphere is plain but not unkind. The keeper offers you a seat at a long table where other travelers pick at their meals. You order the cheapest fare, coarse bread, a slice of hard cheese, and a mug of ale that tastes faintly of the barrel it came from. You overhear snatches of conversation, traders discussing the price of wool, a messenger complaining about the ruts in the road, a pilgrim explaining how far he still has to go to reach his shrine. Everyone here is in motion, their stays measured in hours, not days. This place, like many along the roads, is not meant for lingering. It exists to serve the passing stream of humanity, and the stream must keep flowing. As the day wanes, you begin to think of where you will sleep tonight. The next sizable town is still too far to reach before dark, so you begin watching for signs of shelter. An inn would be ideal, but they are not always where you need them to be. A monastery, perhaps, though not all welcome strangers, and some require proof that you are on a religious journey. You do have a scallop shell hanging from your pack strap, a common token of pilgrimage, but whether it will sway the monks depends on their mood. You pass a crossroads where a wayside shrine stands, a small roofed niche sheltering a carved figure of a saint. Someone has left an offering, 3 copper coins on the wooden ledge. You take this as a hopeful sign. Often shrines like this mark routes frequented by pilgrims, and where pilgrims pass shelter is more likely to be found. By the time the sun dips low, painting the clouds in shades of crimson and gold, you spot the squat, stone-walled shape of a monastery ahead. Its roof catches the last light of the day, and beyond its gates, you glimpse a bell tower. You quicken your steps, the thought of a safe bed or at least a dry floor pulling you forward. At the gate, a lay brother greets you. His robe is plain, his hands red with the cold. You bow your head and explain that you are a traveler weary from the road seeking a place to rest. He studies you for a long moment, then nods and leads you through the gate into a small courtyard. The air smells faintly of herbs and wood smoke. You pass the chapel where a few monks kneel in silent prayer and follow your guide to a simple building along one side of the square. Inside is the guest hall. The room is spare stone walls, a low wooden ceiling, a row of pallets along one wall. Each pallet is little more than a frame with a sack of straw, but they are clean, and a wool blanket lies neatly folded at the foot of each one. You are told you may stay for 1 night, 2 at most. A small table holds a pitcher of water and a loaf of bread for the guests. It is not lavish, but it is safe, and in this century, safety is worth more than gold. After you've eaten, you step outside for a moment. The courtyard is quiet, except for the faint trickle of water from a stone basin. Above the stars spread in cold, clear brilliance, untroubled by the glow of any lamp. The night air bites at your cheeks, but you linger, savoring the stillness. Here behind these walls you are beyond the reach of thieves and the wild things of the forest. When you return to your pallet, the hall is dimly lit by a single lantern. Other travelers have already settled in, some whispering in low tones, others lying silent. You wrap yourself in the blanket, feeling the day's fatigue seep into your bones. Through the stone walls you can faintly hear the monks chanting the final prayers of the day. It occurs to you that in this world your bed is never guaranteed. One night you may be among the warmth of fellow travelers in an inn, the next on a hard pallet in a monastery guest hall, and on other nights still curled in the lee of a hedge with only your cloak for shelter. The road offers no promises, only possibilities. But tonight, at least you have a roof over your head and a place to lay your head in peace. Morning in the monastery comes earlier than you'd prefer. The first sound is the bell's slow measured tolls that seem to seep into your bones rather than jolt you awake. The monks rise in silence, their footsteps soft against the worn flagstones, and move toward the chapel for the morning office. You are not obliged to join them. Though some guests do partly from piety, partly from politeness. You linger on your pallet, watching the faint light creep into the room through a narrow slit of a window. When you finally rise, the air in the hall is cool enough to make you shiver. You fold the blanket neatly, as you have seen others do, and take a small portion of bread from the table. It's dense and dark with a slightly sour tang, a loaf baked to last several days, rather than delight the senses. A clay cup holds water drawn from the well. You drink it slowly, then gather your things, knowing your welcome here has a strict expiration. The monks give freely, but they are not an inn. Their doors are open for charity, not for lingering. Outside the monastery gates, the day feels damp and hesitant. The road glistens faintly, hinting that rain fell in the night. You pull your cloak tighter and set out again, your boots squelching in the softer patches. The world smells of wet earth, wood smoke, drifting from unseen chimneys, and the faint sourness of manure spread in the fields. This is the unglamorous perfume of the medieval countryside. By mid-morning you pass a small hamlet no more than a scatter of timber houses, with thatched roofs, their walls leaning under the years. A woman in a woolen dress stands at a doorway, beating a rug with a stick. Chickens scatter at your approach, clucking indignantly. You nod in greeting, but keep moving. The houses are private, the kind of place where knocking uninvited would not be welcome unless your need was desperate. The road bends, dipping into a shallow valley where a sluggish stream crosses your path. There's no bridge, just a pair of flat stones set for stepping. You pause to drink from your water flask, watching a cart struggle up the opposite slope. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a felt cap, curses under his breath as the wheels sink into the ruts. You know that if he makes it to the next village before nightfall, he'll likely pay for a place in someone's barn. For those hauling goods, the journey is rarely about comfort, only the safe arrival of the cargo. By noon, the sky has darkened, and a fine, persistent drizzle begins to fall. You draw your hood up, but the damp finds its way inside. The road is emptier now, the sensible travelers already sheltered somewhere dry. The next inn might be miles ahead, but you've learned that on a wet day, even the humblest shelter can feel like a palace. After another hour, you spot a low building near the road. its walls whitewashed and streaked with grime. A faded sign swings over the door, a painted picture barely visible through the rain. You push inside and are greeted by a wave of warmth and the scent of wood smoke. The tavern is simple, a central hearth with a small fire, a few long benches, a counter where the innkeeper stands polishing a mug. You pay for a hot drink and a seat near the fire. The mug is filled with something halfway between ale and warm spiced water. It's rough but comforting. Other travelers sit hunched over their cups, steam rising from damp cloaks draped over chairs. A dog dozes near the hearth, twitching occasionally in some private dream. This tavern doesn't have beds. It's the kind of place where locals gather in the evenings for ale and gossip, but where travelers must move on before closing. You take your time, though, letting your boots dry by the fire, while the drizzle outside thickens into steady rain. When you finally step back onto the road, the daylight is waning. You have no guarantee of finding another roof before dark, but you've heard that in some villages, travelers can stay in the alehouse if they strike a bargain with the keeper. These informal arrangements are less comfortable than a proper inn, but the price can be lower, and the company, well, company is what it is. By the time you reach the next settlement, the rain has slackened to a mist. The village consists of a single muddy street lined with houses and workshops. The blacksmith's forge glows red in the gloom, sparks leaping from his hammer blows. The smell of iron and smoke blends with the damp air. You approach a building where the muffled sound of voices and laughter drifts from within. Through the open doorway, you see a long wooden table crowded with men nursing mugs of ale. Inside the alehouse is dim but lively. The keeper, a wiry woman with quick eyes, sizes you up immediately. When you explain your need for shelter, she shrugs and says she can spare a spot by the hearth once the last drinkers leave. No bed, no blanket, but you can lay your cloak on the floorboards and take what warmth remains in the embers. The price is a single coin, and you agree without hesitation. The hours pass, slowly in the noisy room. You sip your ale sparingly, listening to the swirl of conversations, arguments about grain prices, a boast about a hunting trip, the endless back and forth of village news. The floor beneath your boots is sticky with years of spilled drink, and the smell of ale and sweat thickens as the evening wears on. But you are dry and you are among people, and that counts for something. When the last of the regulars finally stumbles out into the night, the keeper clears the mugs and nods toward the hearth. You spread your cloak and lie down the fire's glow, painting the low ceiling in flickers of gold. Outside, the mist has thickened again, wrapping the village in a damp hush. Your eyes grow heavy, the fatigue of the road pulling you down into sleep. It is not comfort exactly, but it is shelter. In the Middle Ages, that is often the only standard that matters. Tomorrow, you will rise and continue on your path, decided less by maps than by where the next roof might be waiting. You wake before dawn again, but this time to the faint crackle of cooling embers and the sound of rain drumming steadily on the roof above. The alehouse is silent now. The boisterous crowd of last night replaced by the stillness of a village not yet awake. Your cloak is stiff where the damp found its way in during the night, but you are warm enough to stretch without shivering. A stray dog noses around the room, sniffing for crumbs, its claws tapping lightly on the worn floorboards. You sit up slowly, rubbing the grit from your eyes, and listen to the quiet. Somewhere outside, a cockerel calls once, twice, then falls silent. You gather your pack, folding your cloak into a rough bundle and fastening it to your shoulder strap. The innkeeper is not yet up, but she's left the door unlatched. Travelers here are expected to see themselves out in the morning. You step outside into the pale gray of early light. The village smells of wet thatch, wood smoke, and the faint sweet rot of fallen leaves clinging to the muddy street. The blacksmith's forge stands cold now, its chimney dark. You pass shuttered windows and closed doors, each house huddled against the damp. The road out of the village is soft with mud, and your boots sink just enough to make you wish for drier weather. The rain eases to a fine mist as you walk beating on your hood. The land here rolls gently, dotted with hedgerows that mark the fields. You pass a shepherd leading his flock toward fresh pasture, his cloak patched and heavy with moisture. He nods at you, but says nothing. Words are precious when the morning is this quiet. By mid-morning, the mist begins to lift, revealing the faint outline of a walled town ahead. Walls in these parts are as much for show as for defense, built low enough to suggest security without being truly formidable. Still, they are a sign of a place where travelers might find structured lodging, something more predictable than a space on an alehouse floor. Your pace quickens. At the gate, a watchman leans on his spear, eyeing you with the practiced suspicion of someone who's seen all kinds pass through. You offer a polite greeting and move on without fuss. Inside, the streets are narrow and uneven, lined with timber-framed houses whose upper stories lean over the road. The air smells of baking bread from a nearby oven, mingled with the sharper scent of tanneries working along the river. You find an inn near the marketplace. Its sign, a carved wooden horse, swings gently in the breeze. This is not the largest or grandest inn you've seen, but it is clean enough at first glance, and the steady trickle of people in and out suggests fair dealing. The innkeeper, a middle-aged man with a thin beard, greets you with a nod and names his price for a night's stay. It's more than the alehouse coin, but with it comes a bed of your own, at least in theory. The room upstairs is small but tidy. The bed is narrow, the mattress filled with fresh straw, and the blanket smells faintly of lavender, a touch meant to mask the other less pleasant scents that cling to such bedding. There is a small stool for your belongings and a window that looks out over the street. It is by medieval standards a fine arrangement. After you've stowed your things, you return to the common room. The midday meal is being served, a pottage of barley and vegetables, thickened with whatever the kitchen could spare. It is hearty if plain and accompanied by coarse bread still warm from the oven. You eat slowly, aware that the warmth of the fire and the weight of food will make it harder to leave later. In the marketplace outside, the day hums with quiet trade. Merchants call out their goods, bolts of wool, baskets of apples, salted fish stacked in neat rows. You wander among the stalls, noting the mix of townsfolk and travelers. The locals eye strangers with curiosity. Not everyone who comes to town is welcome, and many innkeepers keep mental notes about who stays and who stirs trouble. By late afternoon, the clouds have broken, revealing a cold but clear sky. You walk to the edge of town where the road continues eastward. You do not go far tonight. You will sleep in the inn, and your feet deserve the rest. On the way back, you pass a small group of pilgrims entering the town. Their cloaks are stained with travel, and each carries a staff. You wonder where they will sleep tonight. Some might find space in the monastery outside the northern gate, others perhaps in the same inn as you. Pilgrims often travel in clusters, not just for companionship, but for safety. There is strength in numbers when the road is uncertain. Evening settles slowly. The inn fills with the quiet murmur of other guests. Some are merchants tallying their goods by candlelight, others simply locals who come for a mug of ale before bed. The fire glows brighter as the air outside cools. You take your place near the hearth, letting the heat sink into your bones. There is no hurry here. The day's journey is done and the night holds nothing but the promise of sleep. When you climb the narrow stairs to your room, the building creaks around you. The mattress sighs under your weight as you lie down, pulling the blanket over your shoulders. Through the window, you can see the faint gleam of moonlight on the rooftops. Somewhere in the street below, a late-moving cart rattles over the stones. You think about how different this night is from the last. A proper bed, a locked door, a sense of privacy rare on the road. Yet even here, comfort is measured in small degrees. The straw shifts beneath you, a reminder that this is no feather mattress. The air is cool enough to make you burrow deeper into the blanket. But you are safe, and the knowledge of that settles you more deeply than the bed itself. As you drift towards sleep, you reflect on the variety of shelter the road has offered so far: smoky inns, humble monasteries, crowded alehouses. Each place shapes your journey, adding its own texture to the memory of the road. Tomorrow will bring another stage, another search for a roof under which to lay your head. In the Middle Ages, the journey never truly pauses, it only rests for the night. Morning arrives quietly, without the clang of bells or the shuffle of monks, but rather with the slow brightening of the window and the muted sounds of the town waking below. You hear a cart rolling over the cobblestones, the creak of wooden wheels, and the call of a woman selling bread somewhere near the market. The bed has been kinder to your back than most, and though you still feel the familiar stiffness of travel in your legs, you rise with less reluctance than usual. You fold the blanket neatly at the foot of the bed, as is expected, and gather your things. Downstairs, the inn is already alive with movement. The innkeeper's wife is serving mugs of warm ale and small plates of bread and cheese to those setting out early. The hearth is newly stoked, its flames licking the logs with a soft crackle. You take your portion and eat slowly, savoring the warmth of the bread against the cool morning air that drifts in every time the door opens. The marketplace is already in full swing when you step outside. Merchants are laying out bolts of dyed cloth, their colors vivid against the pale winter light. Baskets overflow with onions, apples, and bunches of herbs. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the tang of leather from a cobbler's stall. People call to one another over the clamor, exchanging news as easily as coin. For a traveler, such a place is not just a chance to resupply, but also a chance to overhear the talk of the road, where it is safe, where it is dangerous, where the inns are welcoming, and where they are best avoided. You trade a few coins for a small wheel of cheese and some dried meat, simple provisions that will keep well for the days ahead. While haggling with a merchant, you overhear mention of a roadside inn, a day's walk to the south, said to have a clean stable and generous portions. It sounds promising, though you know such rumors can be more hope than truth. Still, you file the information away. On the road, every scrap of intelligence about shelter is worth remembering. By mid-morning, you leave the town through its southern gate. The guards nod you through with no more than a glance. Beyond the walls, the land opens into rolling fields edged with bare winter hedgerows. A cold wind moves steadily from the west, tugging at your cloak. The road here is better kept than some broad enough for 2 carts to pass, and lined with gravel in places where the mud would otherwise swallow wheels whole. As the hours pass, you encounter other travelers. A pair of merchants trundle past in a cart laden with barrels. A lone rider heads in the opposite direction, his cloak snapping behind him. A group of children shepherd a small herd of goats toward the next village. You trade nods and occasional greetings, but conversation on the road is brief. Everyone is mindful of the daylight. No one wants to be caught too far from shelter come nightfall. By early afternoon, clouds gather overhead, heavy with the promise of rain. The wind carries the damp scent ahead of the storm. You quicken your pace, watching the road ahead for signs of the village said to lie midway to the inn you seek. Soon enough, you spot a cluster of thatched roofs nestled in a shallow valley. Smoke rises from several chimneys, and the sound of a blacksmith's hammer carries faintly on the wind. The village is small, just a handful of houses, a modest church, and a low, wide building that might be a tavern. Inside, the air is thick with wood smoke and the smell of roasting meat. A fire crackles in the hearth, and a few locals nurse mugs of ale at the rough-hewn tables. The tavern keeper offers you a seat and a bowl of stew for a fair price. It is mutton rich with onions and turnips, and you eat it gratefully, feeling warmth return to your hands and face. You consider asking if there's a place to stay for the night here, but the memory of the rumored inn further south tempts you onward. A full day's walk will put you there before nightfall if the weather holds. You finish your meal, thank the keeper, and step back into the road. The sky has darkened further, the wind sharper now, carrying the first cool pricks of rain. The afternoon is a test of endurance. The rain comes in bursts, light enough to walk through, heavy enough to soak you before it eases again. The road glistens darkly, its puddles reflecting the gray sky. Your boots grow heavier with each step, and you silently hope that the inn lies just beyond the next bend. And then at last it appears a solid two-story building set back slightly from the road, its thatched roof neat and well kept. A painted sign hangs above the door showing a running hare. Through the open shutters you catch the warm flicker of firelight. Relief washes over you as palpable as the rain on your shoulders. Inside the inn is warm and bustling. The scent of roasting fowl greets you before the innkeeper does. She is a broad-shouldered woman with a ready smile, quick to offer you a seat near the hearth. The common room hums with quiet conversation. A group of merchants discuss routes at one table while two men in cloaks play a game of dice at another. The price for a bed is fair, and the bed itself turns out to be better than most, a sturdy frame. A thick mattress stuffed with fresh straw, and a blanket that smells faintly of rosemary. You peel off your damp cloak and hang it to dry by the fire, feeling the day's chill retreat inch by inch. Supper is served not long after you arrive, roast chicken, coarse bread, and a small wedge of cheese. It is a feast compared to some meals you've had on the road, and you eat slowly, savoring every bite. Around you, the other guests talk softly, the kind of measured conversation that comes when people are content and warm. The rain patters steadily against the shutters, but here inside you are beyond its reach. Later, as you sit by the fire, you think about the strange mixture of luck and judgment that determines a traveler's nights. Sometimes you find only the barest shelter, a cold corner in a barn, or a damp bed of straw shared with strangers. Other times, like tonight, you find warmth, good food, and a real bed to yourself. The road offers no guarantees, but it does occasionally reward persistence. When you climb the stairs to your room, the floorboards creak beneath your feet. The mattress yields softly when you sit the blanket heavy and warm in your hands. Outside, the rain has eased to a steady murmur, a sound that promises a deep and dreamless sleep. You stretch out, the comfort sinking into you like a blessing, and you wonder what tomorrow will bring. Morning comes with the smell of fresh bread drifting up from the kitchen below. You stir slowly, reluctant to leave the heavy warmth of the blanket. The rain has stopped, though the air feels cool and damp, clinging faintly to your skin. You sit up, stretch, and glance out the small window. The world outside is wrapped in a pale mist, the fields beyond the inn softened into shapes without edges. Somewhere in that haze, the road waits, but for now, you linger. Downstairs, the common room is quieter than last night. A few travelers sit hunched over mugs of ale, their cloaks draped nearby to dry in the gentle warmth of the hearth. The innkeeper's daughter moves between tables with bowls of porridge, and when yours arrives, steam curls from its surface in lazy spirals. You eat slowly, grateful for its plain comfort. A hunk of coarse bread follows, and you tuck a piece into your pack for later provisions are worth carrying, even if small. You speak briefly with another guest, a thin, middle-aged man with a pack not unlike your own. He's heading east, he says, toward a town 3 days' walk from here. His tone suggests he's done this many times, and he shares a small piece of advice. There's a hamlet halfway between here and the next sizable inn, where the reeve, something like the village steward, sometimes allows travelers to stay in the church porch when the weather turns. Don't count on it, he warns, but better than the ditch if you've no roof. You nod, filing away the information. It's not the kind of thing you'll find marked on any map. The morning's walk is easy at first. The road is still wet from yesterday's rain, but the sun is pushing through the mist, turning droplets on the hedgerows into points of silver light. Birds call from the trees, and somewhere far off, a dog barks. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke from scattered farmsteads, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass beneath your boots. As midday approaches, you reach a crossroads where a small shrine stands sheltered by a simple wooden roof. The carved figure within, worn smooth by centuries of weather, watches silently over the travelers who pause here. Someone has left a sprig of dried rosemary on the ledge, perhaps an offering, perhaps a farewell gift to a departed soul. You take a drink from your flask, resting for a moment on the low stone wall before continuing onward. The road narrows as you pass into woodland. Here the light falls in shifting patches through the canopy, and the air is cooler, touched by the scent of moss and wet leaves. Roots reach across the path like the ribs of buried giants, and your steps slow as you pick your way among them. Somewhere above you, hear the faint rush of wind through branches, though down here, the air is still. By the time you emerge from the trees, the sun is already leaning westward. You can see the shape of a small village ahead, clustered around a low stone church. Its tower rises modestly above the surrounding thatch, and from this distance you can see smoke curling from a handful of chimneys. A few figures move in the fields nearby, stooping to gather what's left of the late harvest. You follow the lane into the heart of the village, passing a tethered mule and a pen of noisy geese. The church porch is just as the traveler described, a covered entryway with a stone bench along one side. It would keep the rain off in a storm, though the night air here would be cold. You decide to see if the reeve might offer something better. The reeve is easy to find. He stands in the lane speaking with a man who appears to be the miller. You greet him respectfully, explain your journey, and ask if there's any lodging to be found. He scratches his chin and says there's no inn here, but for a modest coin, you could have space in the hayloft above the stable. The hay's dry enough, he adds, and warmer than the porch. You agree at once. The stable is not large, but the smell of hay greets you warmly. A single horse eyes you with mild interest before returning to its nosebag. You climb the ladder to the loft where the reeve points out a space near the far wall. It's soft enough and the air is warmer here than outside. You thank him and he leaves you to settle in. With the remainder of the afternoon free, you wander the village. Children chase one another between houses, their laughter ringing clear in the cool air. A woman at a doorway kneads bread, her hands white with flour. The mill wheel turns slowly in the stream at the village edge, its steady creak a counterpoint to the rustle of the water. As the sun slips lower, you share a simple meal at the reeve's own table. Coarse bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, and a bowl of lentil pottage. It is plain fare, but the warmth of company makes it more satisfying than richer meals you've eaten alone. You listen to the talk of the village news of a cow calving early, a neighbor's son returning from service in a distant town, the state of the harvest. When darkness settles, you return to the stable. The loft is dim lit only by the moon through the open hatch. You spread your cloak over the hay, easing yourself down into its soft embrace. The rustle beneath you is gentle, the scent of dried grass, soothing after the damp of the road. From below comes the quiet shuffle of the horse, the occasional soft thud of a hoof against the stall. You think as you close your eyes about the shifting spectrum of shelter a traveler finds. Tonight, it is hay. Last night, it was a proper bed. Tomorrow will be whatever the road offers. And so you sleep cradled by the steady warmth of the loft, grateful for the roof, however humble. The dawn comes gently filtering through the open hatch of the hayloft in a pale wash of light. You wake to the faint sound of the horse shifting below the creak of its halter, and the soft huff of breath that steams faintly in the cool air. The hay smells sweet in the early morning, its dry fragrance a quiet comfort after the damp days past. You stretch carefully, brushing stray stalks from your cloak, and sit for a moment listening to the muffled quiet of the village beyond the stable walls. When you climb down the ladder, the reeve is already outside speaking with a pair of villagers who are loading sacks onto a small cart. He nods in greeting, and you thank him once more for the shelter. In return, he offers you a small heel of bread for the road. It's a long way to the next good bed, he says, but the weather should hold. You tuck the bread into your pack, knowing well that such kindness is worth remembering. The village street is lively for so early an hour. Smoke rises from chimneys, children carry buckets from the well, and a woman walks past you balancing a wicker basket piled high with eggs. You pass the church, its door slightly ajar, and catch the faint murmur of a morning prayer within. The sound drifts out into the still air, mingling with the cluck of hens and the ring of a hammer from the smithy. Once you leave the village, the road unfolds across open countryside. The fields are bare now, save for the stubble of the last harvest, and the wind runs unhindered over the land. Your cloak snaps faintly at your side, and the rhythm of your steps falls in with the quiet susurrus of the wind in the hedgerows. The day feels longer than it is. The distances in this part of the country stretch between places of shelter, each mile another thread in the tapestry of the road. By late morning you come upon a lone figure ahead. It is a woman, her back bent beneath a bundle of sticks tied across her shoulders. You greet her as you pass, and she returns the courtesy, warning you that the next village is small. No inn there, she says, but you might find a barn or a porch if you're polite. You thank her and press on your mind, already weighing whether to aim for that village or push further towards something more certain. The sun is high and the air crisp when you reach the hamlet she spoke of. It is indeed small, perhaps a dozen houses gathered around a muddy square. A single well stands at its center, its bucket lying beside it on the stone rim. The only sound is the creak of a shutter, swinging lazily in the wind. You speak briefly with a man tending to a pig near the lane. He says travelers sometimes ask at the mill for shelter, and the miller will sometimes grant it. But best catch him in a good mood, he adds with a half smile. The mill is set back along the stream, its wheel turning slowly in the current. You find the miller splitting wood in the yard, his axe swinging with steady rhythm. When you approach and make your request, he studies you for a long moment before nodding. There's space in the loft, he says. It's dusty and you'll share it with sacks of grain, but it's dry. You agree at once. The loft smells of flour and chaff. Dust motes drift lazily in the slanting light from a small window. You choose a spot near the far wall where you can spread your cloak away from the heavier sacks. The floor creaks faintly beneath you as you settle in. But the grain's dry scent and the gentle hush of the mill wheel outside lend a quiet reassurance. In the afternoon, you walk the edge of the hamlet. A path leads to a small chapel on a rise, its low stone walls flecked with lichen. From here you can see the stream curling through the fields, the thatched roofs clustered along its course. The world feels small and self-contained here, each life bound closely to the land. Evening brings the sound of the mill wheel slowing its steady splash, replaced by the hush of water flowing freely. The miller calls you to his table for supper, coarse bread, a slab of salted pork, and a cup of ale drawn fresh from the cask. His wife speaks little, but her quiet nod when you thank her carries its own weight. Afterward, you sit for a while by the hearth, the fire's warmth a welcome shield against the cool creeping in through the shutters. When you return to the loft, the last light has faded from the small window. The sacks of grain are silent companions, their faint warm smell filling the space. You lie down on your cloak, the wood floor firm beneath you, but blessedly dry. Outside, an owl calls once, twice before silence settles over the hamlet. It is a humble night's lodging, no bed, no blanket, but your own. But it is safe, and in the life of a medieval traveler, that is no small thing. The miller's hospitality, the mill's quiet shelter, and the soft rhythm of the countryside's night sounds fold around you like a rough-spun quilt. Tomorrow you will wake and set out again, the search for the next roof already beginning as you step onto the road. You wake to the smell of flour dust and the faint warmth of grain sacks around you. Somewhere below you hear the steady scrape of a wooden scoop against the floor and the muffled thump of a sack being shifted. The miller is already at his work, though the sun is only just beginning to rise. A faint chill curls through the small loft window, nudging you toward wakefulness. You gather your few belongings, shake the dust from your cloak, and descend the ladder. The miller greets you with a brief nod, handing you a small chunk of bread before you even speak. For the road, he says simply, and you thank him. His wife offers a clay cup of cool water drawn fresh from the stream outside. You drink slowly, savoring its crispness, then set off once more. The morning air is brisk, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from scattered hearths in the hamlet behind you. The road ahead is a pale ribbon through the fields winding gently toward a stand of distant trees. Crows hop along the furrows in the plowed earth, taking to the air in small bursts as you pass. By mid-morning, you overtake a small band of travelers, a man leading a donkey loaded with baskets, a woman with a wide-brimmed straw hat pulled low against the light, and a boy carrying a bundle of firewood strapped to his back. They greet you with cautious courtesy, their eyes flicking to your pack and cloak. You exchange the usual questions: where you've come from, where you're headed, and they tell you they are bound for a market town half a day's walk ahead. The thought of a market town is appealing. Larger towns often mean more options for shelter and inn, perhaps even a guest house kept by a wealthier merchant family. Still, you know the prices can be higher in such places, and competition for beds fierce, especially if a fair or feast day is near. By midday, the land changes subtly. The road grows busier, the fields better tended, the hedgerows neatly trimmed. Small houses begin to appear along the roadside, each with a tidy stack of firewood and a modest garden plot. A cart rattles past, pulled by a pair of sturdy oxen, the driver nodding in greeting as he passes. Soon you catch the faint scent of baking bread on the breeze, a sign you are nearing the town. The sound of distant voices carries ahead, merchants calling their wares, the rhythmic ring of a blacksmith's hammer, the shuffle and clop of feet and hooves over cobblestones. Then rounding a bend, you see the low town wall before you, its gatehouse standing square and solid over the road. At the gate, a pair of watchmen eye the small knot of travelers entering. One calls out a greeting. The other inspects the baskets on the donkey before waving the group through. Inside, the street opens into a broad marketplace. Stalls crowd the square, their canopies in faded shades of red, blue, and brown. Baskets of apples and pears, wheels of cheese, bolts of cloth, and strings of onions all compete for your attention. You take your time walking through the market, keeping half an ear on the talk around you. A merchant hawks salted fish from a wooden tub, the sharp scent mingling with the sweeter smell of honey cakes sold by the next stall. A woman in a green wool dress calls out that she has fresh herbs for cooking. Another sells small clay jugs of ale. But your mind is never far from the question of where you will sleep tonight. You scan the edges of the square, noting two inns, one with a painted sign showing a stag, the other with a carved shield above the door. The first looks lively with voices and laughter spilling into the street. The second seems quieter, the kind of place where travelers keep to themselves. You choose the quieter inn. Inside, the common room smells faintly of rosemary and smoke. A fire crackles in the hearth, and a man sits at a nearby table with a quill and ledger. The innkeeper greets you politely, naming a fair price for a bed and supper. You agree at once, grateful to have the matter settled before evening. Your room is small but well kept, a narrow bed with fresh straw in the mattress, a heavy wool blanket, and a single stool for your pack. A small window looks out over the tiled rooftops of the town, the chimneys puffing thin threads of smoke into the cool afternoon air. You leave your things here and return to the market, deciding to explore while daylight remains. The town has narrow lanes that twist between houses and workshops. You pass a weaver at his loom, the shuttle flying back and forth with practiced ease. A cooper shapes a barrel with slow, deliberate strikes of his hammer. In the churchyard, a group of children chase each other around the gravestones, their shouts echoing off the stone walls. By late afternoon, the air cools further, and merchants begin to pack away their goods. You return to the inn, where the smell of supper is already drifting from the kitchen, a thick stew of mutton and barley served with dark bread and a small wedge of cheese. You take your seat by the fire, letting the warmth seep into your hands. The other guests are a mixed lot, two merchants quietly discussing their accounts. A messenger in a travel-stained cloak, a woman who might be a healer, judging by the pouch of dried herbs at her sada. Conversation is low, the atmosphere calm. You eat slowly, savoring the knowledge that you will sleep in a real bed tonight, without the creak of carts outside your door or the rustle of hay beneath you. Later, you climb the stairs to your room. The streets outside have quieted the market square dark, save for the glow from a few windows. You lie down the mattress, yielding gently beneath you, and pull the blanket up to your chin. The scent of rosemary lingers faintly in the air, and the steady rhythm of your own breath begins to pull you towards sleep. It will be another day on the road tomorrow, another search for shelter, but for now you are warm-fed and at rest. The journey pauses here in this quiet room above the square until the dawn calls you onward once more. The first light of morning filters gently through the small window, painting a pale stripe across the blanket. You wake to the faint murmur of activity below the scrape of chairs on wooden floors, the muted clink of mugs being set on tables. The air in the room is cool, but still holds the ghost of last night's warmth. You linger for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the waking town, then rise, stretching away the stiffness of sleep. Downstairs, the common room has a subdued energy. A few early risers hunch over their breakfast steam rising from bowls of porridge. The innkeeper's daughter moves between tables, her wooden spoon tapping against the sides of mugs as she stirs in honey for those who can afford it. You take your place at a bench near the fire, accepting a plain bowl of barley porridge and a hunk of coarse bread. The food is simple, filling, and warm, the trifecta of a good start for a day on the road. You pay your thanks to the innkeeper, settle your coin, and step out into the morning. The market square is quieter now, emptied of the bustle that filled it yesterday. Only a few merchants are about setting up their stalls for the day. A woman arranges bunches of leeks in neat rows. A man unpacks jars of honey, their golden surfaces catching the thin morning light. The air is crisp and carries the mingled scents of bread baking somewhere close, and smoke from the smithy beginning his work. You follow the road out of town, its cobbles giving way to packed earth as the walls fade behind you. Today's journey will take you into less settled country, again the spaces between villages stretching farther. It's a reminder that even in a region dotted with small towns, the road can be a lonely place. You walk steadily, the rhythm of your steps settling into a quiet pattern, with the occasional crunch of gravel beneath your boots. By mid-morning, the land opens into broad meadows. Frost still clings to the shaded edges of the grass, glinting in the low sun. You pass a shepherd minding his flock, his dog darting at the edges to keep the sheep together. He lifts a hand in greeting, but doesn't call out. His life is measured in seasons, not in the brief encounters of passing travelers. Around midday, you reach a crossroads where a single tavern stands. Its sign, a painted oak tree, swings lazily in the wind. The smell of wood smoke and roasting onions drifts through the open door. Inside, the light is dim, the hearth glowing steadily. You take a seat at a rough table, exchanging a nod with a man sipping ale nearby. The tavern keeper offers you a bowl of pottage thick with lentils and carrots, and you eat it gratefully, feeling warmth creep back into your fingers. You ask casually if there's a place to stay further along this road. The keeper rubs his chin and tells you the next village is small, but sometimes the priest offers travelers a spot in the church's side room. Best to arrive before dark, he says. Otherwise, you'll find the door barred. You thank him for the warning, tuck away the rest of your bread for later, and step back out onto the road. The afternoon wears on the sky, shading toward gray as thin clouds gather. The road narrows, passing between stands of bare trees, whose branches clack softly in the wind. A pair of ravens flap overhead, their cries sharp against the stillness. You quicken your pace, aware of the shrinking daylight. As the sun dips lower, you see the village ahead, a scatter of cottages clustered around a small stone church. The sound of a bell rings faintly as you approach, marking the close of day. Smoke rises from chimneys curling into the darkening sky. You head first to the church. Its heavy wooden door creaks open under your hand, and inside the air is cool and faintly scented with beeswax and incense. A priest in a worn black robe greets you with polite reserve. You explain your journey and ask if there might be a place to sleep for the night. He studies you for a moment, then nods toward a narrow door at the side. The room beyond is small but clean, a stone floor, a bench along one wall, and a pallet stuffed with straw. A folded blanket rests neatly at its foot. It isn't much, he says, but it's warm enough if you keep close to the wall. You thank him sincerely. In the fading light, such hospitality feels like a gift. After a simple supper of bread and broth in the rectory kitchen, you step outside for a moment. The village is quiet now, the last light slipping behind the trees. You hear the faint trickle of water in a nearby stream and the muted bleat of a sheep in its pen. The air smells of wood smoke and the damp earth of late autumn. When you return to your pallet, the little room feels almost snug. The stone wall is cool against your back, but the blanket traps your body heat quickly. Through the door, you hear the faint sounds of the church settling for the night, the creak of timbers, the soft sigh of the wind against the walls. It is not luxury, but it is safety. And on the medieval road that is a currency more valuable than gold. You close your eyes, letting the quiet wrap around you, and drift into sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring new miles, new faces, and the familiar question, where will you sleep next? The morning comes quietly, with the muted glow of pale light seeping through the narrow window in the church's side room. You wake to the faint creak of footsteps on stone and the low murmur of a prayer spoken somewhere beyond the door. The blanket still holds a trace of your warmth, and you are reluctant to move from it, but the road is calling again. You sit up slowly, rubbing the stiffness from your shoulders, and fold the blanket neatly before stepping out. The priest is already in the nave, tidying the altar. He nods in greeting and offers you a small cup of warm ale and a piece of coarse bread before you go. God watch over your journey, he says simply, his voice low but steady. You thank him and step out into the fresh air. The village is still waking. Thin threads of smoke curl from chimneys and a rooster crows somewhere behind a cottage. The road is damp under your boots, the grass along its edges glistening with dew. The air smells of wet earth and the faint tang of wood smoke drifting lazily across the fields. You walk steadily, the sound of your own footsteps, a quiet companion. The miles stretch gently ahead, rolling through low hills dotted with stands of bare trees. By mid-morning, you overtake a man driving a small cart loaded with firewood. He greets you with a nod, his breath steaming in the cold. The cart creaks and groans under its load, and you match its slow pace for a while, exchanging a few words about the road ahead. He tells you there's a village by a ford where travelers sometimes stay in the tavern's loft if the inn is full. The ale's good there, he adds, with a half-smile before urging his donkey onward. The day is calm, the sky pale and thinly clouded. You pass through open pasture land, where a few cows graze close to the hedgerows, their breath rising in faint clouds. The road narrows briefly as it passes between two low ridges, then opens again into a valley where a silver thread of water glints in the light. This must be the ford the carter spoke of. The village lies just beyond a modest cluster of houses gathered along the stream's bank. The ford itself is shallow, its stones worn smooth by years of hooves and wheels. On the far side, you spot the tavern, a timber-framed building with a pitched roof, its sign showing a painted fish swinging above the door. Inside the tavern is warm and dim, the air scented with ale and roasting onions. A fire burns steadily in the hearth, and a few locals sit at long tables, their voices low. The keeper, a stout man with a red face, greets you with an easy smile. You ask after lodging, and he says the inn's beds are taken tonight, but there's space in the loft above the tavern if you're not particular. You'll share it with the sacks of barley, he warns, but the roof doesn't leak. That is good enough for you. You pay for a place and for a bowl of the day's stew, thick with lentils, carrots, and a little mutton. It's hearty and warming, and you eat it slowly, while watching the play of firelight on the beams overhead. Outside, the afternoon light is already beginning to fade, the sky tinged faintly with gold. Before settling into the loft, you take a short walk along the stream. The water slides smoothly over the ford's stones, carrying with it the quiet song of its own movement. Ducks paddle lazily near the bank, dipping their heads beneath the surface. The village seems at peace, its life measured in the steady rhythm of water and hearth. When you return, the tavern is livelier. More villagers have arrived, filling the air with the hum of conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. You linger for a while, nursing a mug of ale, letting the warmth of the room sink into you. The smell of roasting meat drifts from the kitchen, mingling with the sharper scent of the ale barrels. Later, the keeper shows you to the loft. A steep ladder leads to the low-roofed space lit only by the dim glow of a lantern. Sacks of grain and barley are stacked neatly along one wall, leaving a strip of open floor where you and any other guests may lay your bedding. You spread your cloak on the boards, using your pack as a pillow. The air is warm from the day's fire below, and the faint, dry scent of grain hangs in the stillness. From the loft you hear the muffled sounds of the tavern beneath the murmur of voices, the creak of chairs, the occasional clink of mugs. It is a kind of comfort, a reminder that you are not alone in the night. You lie back, feeling the boards beneath you soften in your mind as sleep begins to take hold. Tonight is not a night of luxury, but it is secure, and that is enough. The road will wait for you until morning, ready to test your patience and your feet all over again. You wake in the grain loft to the soft, rhythmic creak of the tavern below, chairs being moved, a broom sweeping across wooden boards, the faint clink of mugs being set out for the day. The air up here is dry and faintly dusty, still holding a whisper of yesterday's warmth. For a moment, you remain still, listening to the muted life of the building beneath you. Then you brush a few stray husks of barley from your cloak and gather your things. Climbing down the ladder, you are greeted by the tavern keeper's wife, who is setting out bowls of thick oat porridge for the early risers. You take one gratefully, along with a hunk of bread still warm from the oven. The crust crackles faintly under your fingers, and the steam carries the familiar, comforting smell of yeast and wood smoke. It's a humble breakfast, but more than enough to set you on your way. Outside, the morning is damp and quiet. A low mist hangs over the stream, drifting across the ford in thin, ghost-like ribbons. The air smells of water and wet earth, the kind of freshness that only lingers in the earliest hours. You cross the ford slowly, the stones slick under your boots, and follow the road as it climbs gently out of the valley. As you walk, the mist begins to lift, revealing the patchwork of fields stretching away on either side. A few crows hop in the furrows, their black feathers shining faintly in the thin light. The road here is firm and well-worn, suggesting it is well-traveled by both carts and riders. Your pace is steady, unhurried today. You have no fixed destination, only the general hope of finding shelter before dark. By mid-morning, you overtake a small group of pilgrims. They wear plain cloaks, and each carries a staff capped with a simple cross. Around their necks hang tokens, scallop shells, badges of saints marking their journey to a holy site. Their faces are weathered, but they greet you with quiet warmth. One of them tells you they plan to stop at a priory a day's walk from here, a place known for taking in travelers. You wish them well and continue on, keeping the thought of that priory in your mind as a possible goal. The sun climbs higher, and the landscape shifts to gentle hills dotted with stands of bare trees. In the hollows between you, catch glimpses of small farms, low stone cottages, smoke curling from squat chimneys, a pen of sheep huddled close together for warmth. The road narrows as it winds between two such holdings, and you pause to let a cart laden with firewood pass. The driver thanks you with a nod, his breath steaming in the cool air. Around midday, you find a place to rest, beside a small bridge spanning a narrow stream. The water runs clear over its stony bed, and you refill your flask, drinking deeply of the cold, clean taste. You eat a little bread and cheese from your pack, the flavors simple and familiar. The sound of the stream is soothing, a reminder that even on the road there are moments of quiet meant to be savored. In the early afternoon, you begin to see signs of a settlement ahead, a scatter of rooftops, the faint toll of a bell, a column of smoke rising steadily into the pale sky. The village is modest but tidy, its cottages built close together along a single winding lane. At its center stands a small church, its door open to the road. You step inside briefly, letting the cool air of the nave settle around you. A single candle burns before the altar, its flame wavering gently in the stillness. The priest, an elderly man with a kindly face, greets you without surprise. Clearly, travelers pass through often enough. You ask about lodging, and he tells you the village has no formal inn, but the cooper keeps a spare room for guests when the need arises. You'll find him by the well, the priest says, and if he's home, he'll help you. You follow the priest's directions and soon find the cooper's house, a timber-framed building, with a shed full of barrels stacked in neat rows. The cooper himself is in the yard fitting iron hoops onto a half-finished cask. When you explain your situation, he wipes his hands on his apron and nods. "I've a bed in the loft," he says. "It's plain, but the roof's tight. The loft is reached by a narrow ladder, its beams low enough to make you duck. The bed is little more than a frame with a straw mattress and a blanket, but the air smells faintly of fresh wood shavings, and the single window lets in a soft spill of afternoon light. You set your pack down and thank the cooper for his kindness. In the evening, you share a meal with his family, thick stew made from beans and root vegetables served with bread fresh from the oven. The cooper's wife speaks gently, asking about your journey, and you answer in kind. Their children listen wide-eyed to the mention of far-off towns, places they know only as names carried by travelers. After supper, you sit by the hearth as the family goes about their evening tasks. The warmth of the fire and the soft murmur of their voices make the room feel smaller, cozier, as though the night outside could never touch it. When you finally climb into the loft, the blanket heavy across your legs, you lie listening to the faint creak of the timbers and the soft sigh of the wind against the roof. Somewhere below, the cooper moves quietly about his workshop, the smell of shaved wood rising faintly through the floor. You close your eyes, letting the small comforts of the day settle over you. It has been neither the finest lodging nor the roughest, just another night on the medieval road, shaped by kindness freely given and shelter humbly offered. And that in this long journey is enough. You wake to the faint creak of the cooper's workshop, below the rhythmic tap, tap, tap of his mallet seating iron hoops onto a cask. Morning light filters in through the loft's small window, tracing a narrow path across the rough straw mattress. The air is cool but dry, carrying the faint scent of fresh-cut wood. You lie still for a moment, savoring the quiet comfort of this borrowed bed, before swinging your legs over the side and making your way down the ladder. The cooper greets you with a nod, pausing in his work, long enough to hand you a mug of warm ale and a heel of bread. His wife appears with a small wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth provisions for the road, she says with a smile. You thank them both, knowing that such small acts of generosity are the currency that keeps a traveler moving. Outside the village is waking. Thin curls of smoke rise from chimneys, and a woman sweeps her doorstep with brisk strokes. A pair of geese waddle noisily down the lane, their cries sharp in the crisp air. You pull your cloak tighter and follow the road out past the church, where the bell tolls once twice to mark the new day. The road today is broad and firm, its surface marked by the grooves of cartwheels. Frost still lingers in the shaded hollows, crunching softly beneath your boots. The fields are mostly bare this time of year, but here and there you see men mending fences or carrying bundles of firewood toward their homes. The sun is pale and low, but its light touches the landscape with a kind of quiet clarity. By mid-morning you overtake a solitary rider, his cloak pulled tight around him, a satchel slung across his back. He slows his horse long enough to exchange greetings and warns you that the next village has an inn, but it is small and often full when merchants are on the road. Best to arrive early, he advises, before spurring his horse gently onward. The land undulates gently as you walk the road, dipping into shallow valleys and climbing to low ridges. On one such rise you pause to take in the view ahead. A patchwork of fields bordered by dark hedgerows, a glint of water from a meandering stream, and far in the distance, the faint suggestion of rooftops. It looks farther than you would like, but the thought of a roof, any roof, keeps your steps steady. Around midday, you find a spot to rest near a stone wall. You eat a little of the bread and cheese the cooper's wife gave you, washing it down with a sip from your flask. The world is still here, save for the occasional flutter of wings as a bird darts from hedge to hedge. The air smells faintly of damp earth and the distant tang of wood smoke. By early afternoon, you reach the village the rider mentioned. It is larger than the last, with a small green at its center and a scattering of cottages and workshops along the main lane. The inn is easy to spot, a two-story timber building, with a painted sign swinging above the door, showing a fox curled in sleep. Inside, the air is warm and smells of roasting meat. The innkeeper, a broad-shouldered man with quick eyes, sizes you up as you step in. When you ask about a bed for the night, he hesitates for a moment before nodding. "You're lucky," he says. "Only one left. The price is fair, though higher than some you've paid, and you agree without argument. Your room is small, with a narrow bed tucked beneath a low-beamed ceiling. The straw mattress is fresh enough, and the wool blanket, though worn, is clean. A single candle stands on a wooden table beside the bed, waiting for nightfall. You drop your pack onto the stool and allow yourself the small luxury of removing your boots before heading back downstairs. The inn's common room is lively by late afternoon. Merchants talk quietly over mugs of ale. A pair of laborers share a platter of bread and pickled onions, and near the hearth a fiddler tunes his instrument with slow, deliberate strokes. You take a seat near the fire, letting the warmth seep into your legs. Supper will not be served for another hour, but the smell from the kitchen is already rich and inviting. When the meal comes, it is a hearty stew of beef and root vegetables, accompanied by bread still warm from the oven. You eat slowly, aware that every bite is a kind of blessing on the road. The fiddler plays a gentle tune as you eat, the melody winding softly through the conversations around you. After supper, you linger by the hearth, watching the fire settle into a steady glow. The innkeeper passes through the room, exchanging a few quiet words with each guest. Outside, darkness has fallen, the windows reflecting only the firelight within. You feel the pull of sleep, not the sudden weariness of a hard day's march, but the slow, steady weight that comes from warmth, food, and safety. When you climb the stairs to your room, the inn is settling into its own rest. The murmur of voices fades, replaced by the creak of timbers and the occasional gust of wind against the shutters. You light the candle and watch its flame sway gently in the still air before snuffing it out. The bed is narrow, the blanket scratchy against your skin, but you curl into its warmth with gratitude. Another day on the road is behind you. Tomorrow will bring another search, another weighing of possibilities, but for tonight you have found your place. You wake to the sound of the inn slowly coming alive. The muted clatter of mugs being set on tables, the soft hiss of logs catching in the hearth, the shuffle of boots across the floor. For a moment, you lie still beneath the coarse wool blanket, feeling its lingering warmth wrap around you. The room smells faintly of smoke and last night's stew, the air cool where it seeps through the shuttered window. You rise, pull on your cloak, and descend the narrow stairs into the common room. The fire has been coaxed back into a bright glow, casting a golden light across the benches and tables. The innkeeper's wife sets a bowl of thick oat porridge before you, its steam curling in the morning chill. She offers a small pot of honey for those willing to spend the extra coin. You pass on it, content with the plain, earthy taste of oats and grain. Outside, the morning is crisp, the sky pale and almost translucent with winter light. Frost sparkles faintly along the edges of the lane, melting under the sun's first tentative warmth. The village is quiet, except for the steady ring of a hammer from the smithy and the lowing of cattle from a nearby pen. You shoulder your pack and make your way out of the village, following the rutted road as it winds between hedgerows, stripped bare by the season. The day begins gently, your breath rising in thin clouds as you walk. A lone rider passes you, his horse's hooves muffled against the damp earth. He offers a nod, but no words, perhaps lost in his own thoughts. perhaps conserving his breath for the long miles ahead. You watch him vanish into the distance, the road narrowing behind him into a thread that dissolves in the rolling land. By late morning, you come upon a crossroads marked by a weathered wooden post. One road curves toward the low hills to the east. The other drops toward a broad meadow bordered by a narrow stream. You pause, considering your choice. The eastward road, you recall hearing, leads toward a larger town with a proper inn, though it's farther than you might manage before nightfall. The meadow road is shorter, taking you toward a smaller village where lodging is uncertain. You choose the shorter road. The meadow opens before you in muted shades of gold and brown, the grasses rustling softly in the wind. The stream runs shallow and clear, its bed strewn with smooth stones. A small wooden footbridge crosses it, the boards creaking under your weight as you pass. Beyond the land rises gently toward a scatter of cottages huddled against a low hill. The village is small, just a few homes, a smithy, and a modest chapel with a squat bell tower. Chickens wander freely in the muddy lane, and a pair of dogs watch you with mild curiosity from a doorway. You ask a woman tending a wash line whether there's a place for a traveler to stay. She gestures toward the far end of the lane where an old barn stands beside a cottage. "Ask there," she says. He's been known to let folk sleep in the loft. The man she refers to is a farmer, his hands thick and weathered from work. He studies you for a moment before nodding. "The hay's dry enough," he says. "Won't cost you more than a coin, and you'll keep out of the wind." You agree at once, thanking him for the offer. The loft smells sweet with dried grass, its air warmer than the chill outside. You find a spot in the corner where a few rough boards make a level space for your pack and cloak. It's not luxury, but it's shelter, and you know it will be enough to see you through the night. With the afternoon still ahead, you wander the village. A pair of children chase each other around the chapel, their laughter bright against the quiet hum of village life. A blacksmith leans in the doorway of his shop, wiping soot from his hands as he surveys the lane. The smell of baking bread drifts from one of the cottages, carried on the soft wind that curls around the hill. As dusk approaches, the farmer invites you to share his supper. A thick stew of beans and barley with bread dark from the local grain. The fire in his hearth throws a warm glow across the room, and the crackle of burning wood is a steady companion to the quiet talk of the meal. You speak little, letting the simple comfort of the moment fill the space between words. Later, you return to the loft. The barn is dark now, save for the faint gleam of moonlight filtering through the slats. You spread your cloak across the hay, easing down into its soft rustle. Somewhere below, a cow shifts in its stall, the gentle sound of its breathing settling into the stillness. The scent of hay and warm animal hides wraps around you, oddly comforting in its earthiness. You know that tomorrow will bring another day of searching, another decision between long roads and uncertain roofs. But tonight, here in the loft, you have enough. The road has given you shelter once again in its humble makeshift way, and that is all you need to rest. You wake to the muffled stirrings of the barn, an animal shifting in its stall, the faint clink of a metal pail, the soft rustle of straw as the farmer moves about below. The loft is dim with the first light of morning, pale streaks of gold slipping through the gaps in the boards. The air is cool but not biting, and the dry hay under your cloak holds a surprising warmth. You sit up slowly, brushing bits of straw from your hair and cloak. The barn smells faintly sweet from the hay and earthy from the animals below. When you climb down the ladder, the farmer is there, setting a bucket of water for his cow. He greets you with a quiet nod and offers a heel of bread before you go. Safe travels, he says simply, as if the words themselves are a kind of blessing. You thank him, tucking the bread into your pack. The lane out of the village is muddy from the night's dew, the ruts soft under your boots. The air smells of damp earth and wood smoke curling from the chimneys you pass. A dog trots alongside you for a short while before deciding you're not worth the trouble and turning back. The day feels still, the kind of morning where the world seems to hold its breath. As you leave the village behind, the land opens into gentle slopes. The road winds through low meadows dotted with bare trees, their branches etching dark lines against the pale winter sky. A light frost lingers in the shaded hollows, crunching softly underfoot. The only sound for a long stretch is your own steady pace, the rhythmic whisper of your cloak brushing your legs. By mid-morning, you see a small cluster of figures ahead. As you draw closer, you recognize them as traveling merchants, two men leading a pack horse laden with baskets and bundles, a third walking ahead with a staff. They greet you politely, and you trade the usual scraps of road talk where you've come from the state of the road ahead. They mention a large fair taking place in a town 2 days' walk north. Plenty of beds there, one says, if you can stomach the noise. You file away the thought, though your path may not carry you that way. You part ways with the merchants at a crossroads marked by an old stone cross, weather-worn but still standing watch over the road. You choose the westerly path, narrower and less trodden, in the hope it will lead to a quieter place to rest tonight. The road meanders gently, passing a few isolated cottages set back from the track. A shepherd waves from a low hill, his flock grazing close around him. By noon, clouds gather soft and gray, carrying the faint smell of rain. You pause at a small brook to drink from your flask and eat the bread the farmer gave you, along with a piece of dried meat from your own stores. The water is cold and sweet, and the sound of it trickling over the stones feels like a small gift from the road. The afternoon stretches long, the road leading you through a shallow valley where the fields are hemmed in by hedges grown wild. A lone magpie watches from a bare branch as you pass. When you crest the next rise, you see a village tucked neatly into the curve of a bend in the road. Its thatched roofs and smoke trails give it the look of a place settled and steady, a welcome sight after the quiet miles. At the edge of the village, you find a small tavern. Its sign, painted with a sprig of hops, swings gently in the breeze. Inside, the light is dim, the air carrying the scent of ale and a faint trace of roasting onions. A few locals sit at tables, speaking in low tones. The tavern keeper greets you, and when you ask about lodging, he shakes his head. No beds here, he says, but the alehouse down the lane might have a space by the hearth for a coin. You follow his directions to a low-roofed building nearer the village green. The alehouse is smaller, warmer, and more crowded. The keeper, a round-faced woman with quick eyes, listens to your request and nods. You can have the bench near the fire once we close, she says. No bedding, but you'll be dry. It's not ideal, but in the life of a traveler, you've learned to take the warmth offered. You spend the evening in the hum of voices, the smell of ale and smoke weaving through the air. The locals speak of weather of livestock, of the state of the roads. A few glance your way, curious but not unfriendly. You sip your ale slowly, stretching the moment, watching the fire burn lower as the night draws on. When the last of the patrons leaves, the keeper clears the mugs and gestures to the bench. You lay your cloak across it, using your pack for a pillow. The fire's glow is low but steady, casting long shadows across the wooden beams. Outside, the wind stirs the thatch, but here in this small pool of warmth, you are safe enough. It is not the best night's lodging you've known, but it is far from the worst. Tomorrow you will walk again, the road unrolling before you, with all its uncertainty. But for now you close your eyes, letting the quiet murmur of the fire ease you towards sleep. You wake slowly, stiff from the narrow bench, but warmed by the fire that must have burned through most of the night. Its embers glow faintly, sending up the occasional spark when the keeper pokes at them. The air in the alehouse is thick with the mingled scents of smoke and spilled ale, but also faintly sweet from the bread baking somewhere nearby. You stretch carefully, then fold your cloak, shaking out a few stray crumbs of straw clinging from the tavern floor. The keeper hands you a small cup of warm ale and half a loaf of bread before you set out. "Keep ahead of the rain," she says, glancing toward the darkening sky beyond the door. You thank her, stepping out into the chill morning. The village is quiet, the lanes slick with dew, chickens scratching in the dirt, as the first real light spills over the rooftops. The road out of the village slopes gently downward, following the curve of a shallow stream. The air smells of wet leaves and the faint metallic tang of distant rain. You walk steadily, the soft sound of the stream keeping pace beside you until it slips away into the fields. By mid-morning, you meet a tinker on the road, his cart piled high with pots and pans that clink gently with each step of his pony. He offers a few words about the weather. Likely to turn before evening, and tells you there's a crossroads ahead, where one way leads to a larger market town, the other toward quieter country. You thank him and part ways, already thinking about which path to take. The day remains cool and gray, the light muted by the thickening clouds. You follow the road toward the larger town, hoping for more certain lodging. The landscape flattens here, the fields stretching wide under the low sky. A few farmsteads break the expanse, their chimneys trailing smoke in thin threads that vanish into the gray above. By early afternoon, you see the outline of the town's gate ahead, sturdy but modest, with a pair of watchmen leaning against their spears. They wave you through with little more than a glance. Inside, the streets are busier than you've seen in days, merchants arranging goods in open stalls, townsfolk carrying baskets, a pair of boys chasing each other between the market carts. The sound of trade hums through the air, voices calling out coins, clinking the occasional bark of a dog underfoot. You spot an inn along the main street, its sign a painted heart swinging gently above the door. Inside, the common room is bright with firelight, the smell of roasting fowl mingling with the sharper scent of ale. The innkeeper greets you warmly and names a price for a bed. It is not cheap, but you take it without hesitation. After so many nights on benches, haylofts, and bare boards, the promise of a real bed feels worth any coin. The room is small, but well kept, a narrow bed with fresh straw beneath the mattress, ticking a wool blanket folded neatly at the foot, and a small table with a stub of candle. You drop your pack on the stool and sit for a moment, simply enjoying the quiet of a space that is yours for the night. In the evening, the common room fills with travelers and locals alike. The talk is lively, a mix of news rumor and idle boasting. You take your supper, a thick slice of roasted fowl bread and a cup of dark ale by the fire. The warmth seeps deep into your bones, and you find yourself sinking into the bench with a quiet sense of contentment. Later, you step outside for a moment. The street is dim under the cloudy night sky, but the glow from the inn's windows spills across the cobbles. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls the hour, and the muffled sound of laughter drifts from another tavern down the way. You breathe in the cool, damp air, then turn back inside. When you finally climb into bed, the mattress yields gently under your weight, the blanket heavy and warm. You can still hear the faint hum of voices from below, but it is softened now as though wrapped in layers of wool. You lie still, feeling the day slip away. On the medieval road, each night's shelter is a coin toss, sometimes comfort, sometimes hardship. Tonight, you've landed on comfort. And as you close your eyes, the road itself fades into the background, holding you gently in the pause between days. You lie there a while longer, letting the quiet of the room settle around you like a soft, well-worn cloak. The fire downstairs has burned low, its warmth now just a memory in the floorboards beneath your feet. Somewhere outside, the night air brushes gently against the shutters, a faint and steady whisper, as if the wind itself were telling you it is time to rest. The road will wait. Tomorrow it will be there again, stretching over hills and fields, leading to more doors, more strangers' hearths, more moments of luck and chance. You have walked it long enough now to know that it never truly ends. But tonight, you have stepped off it for a while. You are not in a hurry. You are simply here. Your mind drifts back over the places that sheltered you, smoky inns, where laughter spilled into the night. Quiet monasteries where the air smelled faintly of beeswax and prayer. Haylofts warmed by the breath of animals below. Benches by alehouse fires where strangers' voices lulled you toward sleep. Each was different, yet each carried the same promise that for one night you were safe. The bed beneath you creaks softly as you shift. The blanket is heavy in a way that anchors you, that says you do not need to move again until morning. Your breathing slows. Even the quiet hum of the town outside is fading now, replaced by the gentler rhythms of your own rest. And so the road disappears for now. You close your eyes, and the world draws in close around you, warm, still, and untroubled. For the first time in days, you do not think about where you will sleep next. You are already there,